Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Open to Life podcast. This is episode 16, I believe, and today I am with Emily Frase, rhymes with crazy, as she self-describes. Welcome, Emily. Happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Melanie. I just blanked. This is the end of the day. So here's how we're going to start this. It's the end of the day. I've just put kids to bed. So if at any point in this podcast, my brain just blanks, that's where I'm at.
Okay.
But yes, no, I'm so excited to be here and thanks for inviting me on.
Yes. So Emily, you are the co-founder of Fambase, and you also have your own podcast called Total Wine. Very cool.
Yeah, it's on a indefinite hiatus at the moment. But yes, yeah, the nonprofit is not on hiatus. The podcast is. But yeah, I've had so many other projects come up and just had to put that on the back burner for the time being. But yeah, it was a ton of fun while I was doing it.
Yeah. There's a season for everything. I have listened to every episode of the Total Wine podcast, not in one sitting. It's very good. I definitely
would not recommend one sitting.
Definitely encourage everyone to go have a listen over there. So, Emily, tell us a little about what led to the founding of Fambase. What is Fambase?
Yes, first of all, congratulations on saying it. Most people, they see the spelling and they're like, what the heck is FAbM Base? So you have listened to all of the podcasts. You have heard me talking about it. Well done. You passed the test. Yeah, so it was founded back in 2020 by a friend of mine and I. Together. We wanted to combine kind of our opposite fertility stories. At the time, I had 2 surprise babies and she was infertile. I was a Marquette user, a Creighton practitioner. And so the more we started talking and the things that we were wrestling with, we had 2 different focuses, but the same basic passion, which was how can we make this information accessible to women no matter their faith or their stage of life. And like, what can we do to kind of start removing those barriers? Because one of the things that we recognized was common in both of our stories was if we had been educated sooner, a lot of the problems that we faced probably wouldn't have panned out the way that they did. So recognizing, and granted, our organization is targeted more for young adult single women. So, probably late teens, 20s, 30s, single, married, engaged. So our organization is not geared towards very young girls. Like I have an 8-year-old daughter. Like I'm not sitting her down on my website, but we know I'll give her the cliff notes, which I do, and it's very fun. But anyway, yeah, so I can't remember if I even said her name, Mary Bruno. She's on Instagram. You would know her as White Lotus Blooming. She is a published author. She has several books, so she has a heart for speaking to the infertile woman. I have a heart for speaking to women who have kind of struggled with the practice of NFP, abstinence, surprise babies, all those types of things. And so we really just kind of brought that together and Fambase was born.
Yeah, the 2 worlds collided. So what did you feel maybe was missing from the NFP fertility landscape that you wanted to solve through Fambase?
Yeah, well, I think several things. I think our main mission is to make fertility awareness education more accessible and authentic. So when it comes to the accessibility, like with me, for example, going through marriage prep, I didn't know that there was different methods that you could choose from. The method that I learned in marriage prep is not the method I use now. In fact, I used 3 different methods before I landed on this one, or this was the 3rd method that I used. And so again, like that was one of the areas where if I had known that there was other options and I had the ability to understand what my options were, how do they work? What does charting look like in each of these different methods available? And then like if I actually had the ability to make the best choice for myself from the beginning, that would have saved a lot of heartache. And it's always weird talking about this because if those things didn't pan out the way that they did, I probably wouldn't have my 3 children. I almost definitely wouldn't have my 3 children. So it's a weird thing to be like, yes, I kind of wish I had known from the beginning, but also I wouldn't have my kids. And Mary felt the same way. So she had severe cycle issues from a very young age and just didn't have the avenue. Her mom took her to the OBGYN's office. And of course, it's like, what birth control do you want? She's like, well, I don't want birth control, but that was the only option she was given to manage her health issues. And so that just kind of went unaddressed for years. And if she had had that addressed sooner, she eventually ended up with a full hysterectomy. And so if she had had that addressed sooner, her outcomes may have been different as well. So we really, I guess if you just kind of sum it up, it's like, let's just save people a lot of unnecessary heartache. You know, like, let's make this information accessible. And again, like, that's why, so our organization, like, we are both devout, faithful Catholics. Our organization is not overtly Catholic because we don't want faith to be a barrier. Because, like, it's not like a Catholic woman's body works different from an atheist woman's body or a Hindu woman's body. Like, we're all, like, I mean, we as Catholics believe we're all designed by the same God in the same image, right? And, like, women's bodies, like, it's a universal thing. So you shouldn't feel that barrier to accessing just basic information about how your body works because it's got a Catholic front. So I wanted to take that away. When it comes to the authentic part, both Mary and I are very open and upfront about our stories and the areas where we struggled and the times where we were angry at the church and all those types of things. So that just informs and infuses all of the information that we present and the way we try to present it on our website. So
yeah. And I saw on your website that Fambase is meant to be an intersection where science and real life meet. What does that intersection look like in practice?
Well, I mean, anybody who's charted knows knowing how to chart is like, I don't know, like what, 20% of the learning curve? It's I mean, that in and of itself can be a steep learning curve, especially if you're learning it in the middle of planning a wedding, right? It's the worst possible time.
I totally agree.
But what the chart is going to show you, your chart is going to show you the way your fertility works, the way your body works. ACOG has recognized or named the menstrual cycle as the 5th vital sign. So what that means is when you chart, you get a read on your overall health. So you're getting a read not just on what your fertility is doing. You're getting a read, for example, on your relational health. How's your relationship with your spouse, with your partner? What's your work-life balance looking like, right? Like what are the stressors in your life and how are those things being managed? What is your diet? What is your, do you move your body every day? Like all these things that we're now starting to hear about more and focus on more, like a wellness type of culture, which I know Pope Francis very wisely was like, all right, y'all, the wellness is great, but temperance, little temperance here, pump the brakes. But yeah, so like learning the way that your cycles work and charting is it can be very precise science, like nitty gritty, like you're getting into the nitty gritty details of like all these different biomarkers. But what that information is giving you is a read on your spiritual, mental, physical, emotional aspects of who you are. And I remember years ago, just as an example, I was in therapy and I think I was like maybe 6-8 months in and was, just digging up some very intense stuff.
We love therapy.
It's fabulous. It's fabulous. I mean, it hurts so good, the song. It hurts so good. That's what I think. But I could read it in my chart. Like there was a very particular stressful time in therapy and it was like my ovulation was super delayed. And I was like, oh, tell me you're in therapy without telling me you're in therapy. Show me your chart, And so like I love kind of showing women that this is it's such practical information. Now it can also become overwhelming. And this is another area where like the real life side of it comes in. When you see all that in your chart, it's overwhelming. Oh my gosh, look at the effect that all these different aspects of my life are having on my health and on my fertility. And then it's like, well, which one do I fix? And do I fix it now? And so there can be like a very frenetic, my kids are obsessed with Inside Out 2 right now. And so anxiety, right? Like just taking control of the board. Right. And so again, like, this is where I think our faith is really great at, giving us the virtues of like temperance and prudence and recognizing like, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is a great tool for understanding your overall health. And you can apply it in ways that are incredible. I mean, just for me, like basic stuff, knowing when my cycle is coming, like I can meal plan, right? Like, I don't want to be standing over a stove making dinner. I'm like, honey, we're doing pizza, or whatever. Or planning ahead, like, hey, babe, like, I'm going to be on my cycle. Like, or not on my cycle, on my period. The cycle is the whole thing.
Yes.
I'm going to be a stickler for vocab. Anyway, but like, hey, can you help me with dinner tonight or whatever? And it doesn't have to like catch me by surprise. Like I know some women are like, well, I just want to know when I can put a pad in my purse. I was like, yeah, and so much more.
And the next thing.
And the next thing, yeah. And just basic, like harnessing, you've probably heard about like cyclical living. It's like, I can pay attention to the way that my brain works and the way my energy flows during my follicular phase, which a lot of times people will say that your energy is higher, you're feeling more creative. And then like during your luteal phase, like you're needing to kind of dial back and calm down and kind of go at a slower pace, right? So trying to think of like, hey, what could that look like, right? So that's kind of a real life thing too. And I think really that's where you can be really countercultural, right? Like, how radical to be like, no, I'm not going to act like I have a 24-hour hormonal cycle like a man does. I'm going to embrace my roughly monthly cycle and try to live in harmony with that, which is really difficult in a world that's not designed that way. But like, I mean, way to stick it to the man. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, I'm gonna live cyclical, right? So I just think like those little things, like those tidbits of how you can apply this, and ultimately like what I'm describing for like your Catholic viewers, like that's, to me, cycle charting is the most tangible way of living the virtue of chastity, because you really do understand how your sexuality, your fertility is integrated with the whole of who you are, which is how the catechism actually defines chastity.
With the whole
It's
person.
about integration. So if you can learn the way your body works and then ask that question, how can I live in harmony with this? That is a very tangible way to live the virtue of chastity, no matter what your station in life.
Wow, beautifully said. So I had my own NFP surprise baby. My son, JT as we call him, Jose Tomas, is 14 months now. And I learned that term, NFP surprise, from listening to you. So I know you have your own experiences with NFP surprises. Can you share a little about what that taught you with learning to trust and surrender?
I think it's very important to share that I didn't learn to trust. I stopped trusting at first, completely. There was one time at church, there was a picture of Divine Mercy up at the front of church, which for those who don't know, there was a Saint Faustina. She was actually alive during World War II, died in the Holocaust. She had visions of Jesus, and Jesus gave her this image of himself, which he called Divine Mercy. And at the prayer that goes with it is, Jesus, I trust in you. And I looked Jesus dead in the eyes. And this was after I was pregnant with our second surprise. And I said, Jesus, I don't trust you. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. The reason why was because our first child was born via C-section. And then our second child was conceived too close a spacing. And so he was an automatic repeat C-section. And I was so angry at God. I was like, we're doing everything right. We're not contracepting. We're following the rules. I was like, what, like, am I just supposed to like make babies and like have C-sections and die? Is that like how this is supposed to go? Like, is this all you want for me, that I just like pump out all these kids and then leave them? I mean, it was a dark time. It was a very dark time.
It's heavy.
Very heavy. And then after our second child was born, it was very strange. Like I think I was getting wheeled out of the OR, and I describe it as like Jesus turning the light back on in my soul. Because during that whole pregnancy, I couldn't feel the presence of God at all. It was a dark night. And I was getting wheeled out of the OR. It was like, there you are. Hi, where you been? Where you been, buddy? And then it was, even though there was kind of a light switch moment, it still took years to rebuild that trust. And I remember one time in particular, I just got so frustrated because there was a period of time that passed and a lot of good things came out of it, a lot of good fruit. I had been reconciling a lot of the aspects of my story and whatnot, but I was still having a hard time like letting go and trusting. And I got to the point where I was just so frustrated with it. And I was like, okay, Jesus, look, we're going to be real juvenile about this. Okay. Real juvenile. I'm going to ask you like something really small, like embarrassingly and insultingly small. Okay. And I need you to just do it. Like, just help me. Just like, this is where I'm at. I need you to just meet me there. And we lived in an apartment at the time, and we were coming home from visiting some friends, and in our complex, parking was abysmal. Of course, we come home late. So I know there's not going to be any parking. It's raining. We have both the kids. Like, we're going to have to park like a mile away from our apartment and walk back. We don't have an umbrella, all the things. Right?
Oh, miserable.
And so, right. So I was like, all right, Jesus, here's your moment, buddy. Find us a parking spot close to our apartment. We pulled into the parking lot, and there was a spot right in front of our door.
Praise the Lord.
I was like, okay, you see me, you're meeting me where I am. Thank you. And so that was kind of a moment. Again, that wasn't like the final moment. Really, it was in therapy where that really started to get rebuilt, because I was really, really dealing with the anger that came from all the questions that I had, and the ways that I felt abandoned, and the ways that I felt like the church had failed me and that God had failed me. And so little by little, I would say it's taken 7 years, and I'm still working on it. Yeah.
Emily, your story about your NFP surprises and your C-sections really resonate with me, because I also had a C-section when I was hoping for a natural birth at a birth center. And after my C-section, I struggled with low breast milk supply, tried all the Western and Eastern methods. It was a mystery. No one could help me with increasing my supply. My son wouldn't latch. And then I also was suffering from postpartum depression. So sometimes when I reflect, I feel that pain come up again of this just, why God did you give me a baby at that time? And then, okay, I have the baby, but at least I'd get the birth I wanted, right? Wrong. Okay, I don't get the birth I wanted, but at least I'll get the breastfeeding experience I want, right? Wrong. Like, it was just like, boom, 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 like getting dealt this bad hand of cards. And so that's something that I have, time has passed, and I feel in a better place now, and I am in love with my son. I, having been an NFP fanatic, I know I'm very confident that I was outside of the fertile window when my son was conceived. Like, I feel like it's a mystery. I look at the data, I look at all the science, and the science was not sciencing. The math was not mathing. Like, it does not add up how my son came into the world, but still God said, let there be life, and my son came. And so your story just really touches me. And I know that you went on to have a third child after secondary infertility. How was that for you? If I can ask, did you have a VBAC? I don't think I know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. No, I did not have a VBAC.
Oh, okay.
I was, well, so yeah. Secondary infertility was weird, very weird, primarily because I had been so public in, talking about this. And especially at this point, I'm very good friends with Mary. Like, we've talked very in depth about infertility and that experience. And when I realized that I was now experiencing secondary infertility, it was a very confusing place to be, because I knew, from outside appearances, at this point, we have a daughter and a son. We have, quote unquote, the perfect family, right? So you should be happy, like, you did your due, you replaced yourself, well done. Like, if you have more kids, like, did you plan, now we're going to start getting the weird questions. But there was just such a deep ache and a deep longing for another child. And there was so much guilt over that, because, well, why couldn't I be happy with what I had? Right. Mary was really awesome. She gave me the opportunity to do a Q&A blog with her, where I got to share this experience on her blog. And it was a very, very cathartic experience of being able to articulate what that felt like. I felt like a because, again, I have two children. I'm not in the situation of primary infertility, which I know so many women who are in that boat. I've walked with a lot of women who were in that boat. And so wanting to ask for support felt wrong. Well, I'm not in their shoes, so what's the big deal? And what was really fascinating was none of this came from women who were infertile. This is all just me in my own head, just being again, this is where therapy is very helpful. One of those other areas. But what was really cool about that, in hindsight, not at the time, but in hindsight, which is a real jerk, by the way, it always shows up after you don't need it. If you've noticed, whenever I realized we had secondary infertility, so we avoided for 2 years after our son was born, after our second child was born. 2 C-sections, don't want to repeat, right? And then when we started trying, it was really weird. So I had taken 3 pregnancy tests at that point. None of them showed me the result I wanted to see. The first 2 were positive when I wanted them to be negative, and the third one was negative when I wanted it to be positive. And I laughed at God. I was like, of course, I ask you for something and you give me the opposite. So that was the beginning of me being able to work out stuff with him. But what I prayed for when we started trying was, Lord, give me a healing pregnancy. And what I meant was erase my memory of those past experiences. And Jesus was like, yeah, that's not how healing works. And so instead, I believe that he gave me that period of secondary infertility because that's when I got into therapy. There was something that happened during that was like a trigger for me. I was like, okay, now it's time to go. And that was where in therapy, I realized that I had processed my first 2 C-sections as traumatic. A lot of pieces started to kind of fall into place and to make sense.
Yeah.
So whenever we did find out, a year and a half after we started trying, when we did find out we had conceived, I was like, I don't know why I conceived now and not before. It was very weird. And there was, of course, some fear there because there was a potential underlying issue called an isthmusal. And I just want to say that word on here for anybody who's dealing with a C-section, infertility after C-section. It's a condition where the C-section scar doesn't heal properly or is not sewn up properly and can cause infertility. So if you have a C-section, unusual bleeding during your cycle, and infertility, that might be worth something to look into. And I can send you a link if you want to put it in the show notes for people to look into that further. But I was about to go see a doctor to rule that out. And that's when I found out I was pregnant. So I couldn't go see the doctor to rule that out because the procedure you can't do when you're pregnant. And so, I just felt a lot of guilt for that because there was also a high risk of miscarriage if that was the issue that I had. But no, that kid, he's going to be turning 3 in September. He's insane. And I mean that with just nothing but love. But so it was a very healing pregnancy. I was shooting for a VBAC. I was with a practice that they were kind of feeding me the same lines that my other practices had fed me about, let's wait and see what happens. And right around, I think it was right before 30 weeks, I was talking to my husband and I was just like, I'm really nervous. I'm really scared. And he's like, one of my coworkers' wives just hired a doula. Why don't you do that? And I did. And these doulas told me that there is an actual VBAC supportive practice. And I switched. If I had waited, I think 1 more week, I wouldn't have been able to transfer. They wouldn't have taken me after that point. So very much like intervention of providence. So anyway, he was born via C-section. I already gave away the end of the story. But it was very providential. He, the day that they were originally going to schedule the C-section, I had gotten them to push the date back, but they had me come in for testing because I had gestational diabetes. I had COVID during pregnancy, and they wanted me to do some routine testing just to make sure things were okay. And it turns out the tests showed that there were some issues. And so I was not showing any signs of labor. I was 40 weeks and 6 days, no signs of labor whatsoever. So my doctor was like, we can't induce you out of nowhere. So it's going to have to be a C-section. We have to get that baby out. Something's not right. And I just, I felt so much peace in that moment because the way that she responded to me, she was like, I know you wanted a VBAC. How are you doing? And it was incredible that just that one question made the difference between this experience being traumatic and not. That sounds ridiculous, but it was the acknowledgement of like, nope, I'm a person and you see me.
Yeah.
Thank you. It really is that simple.
Yeah.
It really is. But anyway, so after he was born, they found that I had a placental abruption. And if I had gone into labor naturally, it would have been catastrophic. Either, very high likelihood he would have died. I could have died, bad, very bad. And the reason why they didn't induce me is because I had 2 prior C-sections. So in a weird kind of way, my 2 previous C-sections saved my 3rd child's life. And no, I do not believe for a second that God willed the trauma, that he willed things to play out the way they did. But I absolutely believe that part of that healing process was me handing over all of that to him. And because I gave him all of that woundedness and brokenness and hurt, the only thing God's capable of doing is turning it into something beautiful. And that's what he did. And so again, like he did not want any of the bad. And that was something I really had to work through because one of the things I realized coming up in therapy was I thought God was a sadist. I was like, I thought that he wanted bad things to happen, right? Because when we suffer, we are purified, right? So like, obviously you want us to suffer because good things come out of it. And it's like, woof, no, that is not what he wants. But when we give him our pain, when we give him our suffering, when we give him our sin, only thing he can do is make something beautiful. And he did.
Yeah, beautiful. What would you say to someone who hears about your NFP surprises, secondary infertility experiences, and says, NFP is a hard sale? That sounds chaotic. Why would I sign up for that? Why don't I just get on birth control or look into IVF? What would you want to tell that person?
Well, I've never heard that. In fact, I only ever hear the opposite.
Really?
But it's because I'm honest and open, because I don't sugarcoat, that people are more open and willing to try NFP because I just shoot it straight.
Wow.
That's what I think people miss about being honest about the struggles of NFP. One of my dearest friends, who is not Catholic, has used birth control since she was 14. After she had her first child, she went back on birth control. And that was the first time in her life where she realized what she was like off of birth control. And so when she went back on, she was like, whoa, I feel horrible. this stuff is making me feel horrible. And she came to me and she said, now this was after I had had both my surprises. And she came to me and she said, Emily, I'm real nervous to come talk to you, but there's got to be other options. What can you tell me? And she is now a huge proponent for fertility awareness. She works in politics. She does a lot of work in Washington, D.C., and she is an advocate for this in our nation's government right now. So I've never been honest about my story and had somebody be like, well, screw that. I'm going to pop a pill. I'm going to strap on a condom. It's the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to say that nobody's ever said that. I've just never heard it, which doesn't mean it's never been said, but I've shared my story a lot. And the only thing that I hear back is people relieved that they're not the only ones who are struggling. And that relief, what I find is that when people know that they're not alone, they're not the only ones struggling this way, it gives them it's like a release. It's like, oh, I'm not the only one. And just that in and of itself, that feeling of I'm not alone, like that leaving aside that loneliness, finding that camaraderie gives people the strength to continue.
Wow. So you would encourage then all the truth telling with the hope that that would not be discouraging to people.
No. I mean, I might need to get on my rant box, not even a soapbox, a rant box.
Yes.
Can I get a rant box? Okay.
Get on the box, Emily.
Sweet Lord. No, it was when I went through marriage prep, I got told a whitewashed, sugar-coated version of what NFP was going to look like. And that is what made my experience 1,000 times harder because it wasn't the truth. It certainly wasn't the whole truth.
Yeah.
It was maybe one person's story, which is great for you, but you've been married for like 40 years. You can look back on all of this. You're not in the messy middle. You can look back on all of this stuff through this lens of seeing how it has shaped you and your marriage into something good and beautiful. But I'm in the muck right now. And I need to know that you can give me that vision of hope and also not be afraid of encountering me where I am in the messy muck right now. And this is what I describe it as. We serve the God of truth. Like Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. When we whitewash and sugarcoat, we are not being honest. And if we serve the God of truth, we cannot even give white lies just because we want people to do this practice. No, it's hard. It's hard. But I mean, the truth is, nothing is easy. No matter what choice you make, nothing is easy. I know other choices certainly look easier. Vasectomies are not easy. Birth control pill is not easy. Condoms are not easy because at the end of the day, you are still talking about how to integrate a healthy, holy, beautiful sex life within your marriage to where it is truly life-giving in all of the ways, right? None of it is going to be easy. Absolutely not in a fallen world. None of it. Not having sex at all, having sex and then trying to, figure it out. None of it is going to be easy. So it kind of comes down to choose your heart. What do you want your heart to be? And then I want people to give me an accurate vision of what my heart that I choose is going to look like. So that way, when I step into it, I know exactly what I'm accepting. We were told that we were only going to have about a week of abstinence. It turned out to be 2 weeks. It turned out to be 2 weeks for us because my cycles are longer. And I thought we were doing something wrong. And I thought I was depriving my husband and all this type of stuff. Right. And, everybody was like, oh, abstinence is beautiful because it gives you a honeymoon effect.
Yeah.
I was not feeling any honeymoon effect. There was no honeymoon effect.
Yeah. Neither do I. I do not feel
honeymoon sex was horrible. Who are we kidding? I don't want to go back to my honeymoon and have sex like that. No, we were rookies. We've figured out a lot since then. You know what I mean? So no, there was just so many things that were pitched to us that were whitewashed, sugar-coated, tied up with a nice pretty bow, like couples frolicking in meadows, all that type of stuff, right? That's certainly a place where you can be. But what we have to recognize is that in a fallen world, we do not get the joy without pain. There is no such thing. If we want the joy, the pain will come with it as well. That's just the nature of this being a fallen world. And what we have, as Catholics, you walk into any Catholic church, what's at the front of that church? A big old massive crucifix.
Yeah.
A symbol of torture, right? Suffering is in our face every time we walk into a church. it frustrates me to no end that Catholics have a hard time speaking honestly about suffering and trying to sanitize it and make it look nice. It's no, it's gruesome. It's ugly. You walk into any Catholic church, you see it, but it's not the end of the story, right? But here's the thing. The condition of the resurrection is the crucifixion. And we can't fast forward to the resurrection while hiding the crucifixion. Because if anybody is going to rise, they die first. Jesus was very clear about that in the Gospels, right? Yeah. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it has no life, right? Death is the condition of life in a fallen world. So if we're not honest about that, we're not preparing people for what that's going to look like and how that's going to play out. We're cutting them off at the knees. We're not giving them the tools. And so, yeah, be brutally honest. The only people that I meet who don't like what I say are people who, some, not all, typically speaking, it's more people who've been teaching NFP for many, many, many years. They don't like what I say.
Interesting.
Because they think that this turns people away. And I'm like, no, I've had people be like, wow, this really sucks. I don't particularly care for it. But the fact that I'm honest and I just speak openly about it, I'm able to continue to engage them. Like they know they're dealing with an honest broker, not somebody who's going to be like, oh no, this is beautiful and wonderful. Listen, it is beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah.
And it sucks massive chunks some days.
Both and.
You don't get the one without the other.
Yeah. So having said that, if you could rewrite the NFP sales pitch, not as the honeymoon phase, but a radical invitation, what would that sales pitch sound like?
Where's ChatGPT when you need it? I'm kidding. I'm so kidding. So kidding. I think I would actually harken back to what I said earlier in our conversation. This is the most tangible way I can think of to live the virtue of chastity. Because at the end of the day, people are like, oh, chastity means celibacy. No, it doesn't. It's the integration of your sexuality with the whole of who you are, which within marriage includes sex. So chastity is not synonymous with celibacy. Celibate people are called to chastity and married people are called to chastity. Everybody's called to chastity, to integrate their sexuality. And ultimately, at the end of the day, isn't that what's going to create the best sex life? Isn't that what's going to create, isn't that going to help you facilitate being open to the life that God has planned for you? I that would be my pitch.
Wow. Yeah, I want the best sex life. Who else?
No, I want terrible sex, said no one ever.
Yeah. So it's definitely true that oftentimes what is best for us is also hard, but still worth doing.
I mean, think about it. I mean, why is it that we have absolutely no problem accepting that if we want a rockin' bod, we got to hit the gym?
Yeah.
But if we want a rockin' sex life, it should come easy and it shouldn't take any work whatsoever. Excuse me. No, anything. If you wanted to learn, going to college, learning anything, right? If you want to learn algebra, sorry if that triggered anybody. If you want to learn, it triggered me. If you want to learn biology, if you want to, name any subject, if you want to learn art, you have to put yourself under the discipline of whatever it is that you're learning. We accept that across the board, that hard work yields reward, except when it comes to our sex life. It should just come naturally. It should come easily. We shouldn't have consequences. So-and-so should just be able to please me. And it's like, whoa, bro, no. This does take work, and guess what? That's okay. That doesn't make it bad or wrong, I know people are thinking hey, we should figure out if we're sexually compatible before we get married, those types of things. It's sexual compatibility is rooted in your commitment to one another. And my husband and I have a wonderful sex life. Does it come easily? No. Is it fireworks every single time? No. No. Does that make it bad? No, because that's not life. Some good things in life aren't necessarily fireworks, but that doesn't make them bad or less than. It just makes it part of life, part of what makes it interesting and varied. Yeah.
I really admire that Fambase, as you said earlier, is not overtly Catholic, but trying to reach anyone and everyone who would be open to the message of fertility awareness. Do you have a way how you pitch NFP to non-Catholic Christians or secular people?
I mean, again, I always lead with my story. Anytime I pitch it anywhere, I just lead with my story because I recognize that this is a very tender topic. Like when we talk about fertility, we talk about the deepest and most intimate parts of who we are. And I recognize, like, if I'm speaking to a non-Catholic, I recognize that they have an intellectual, conceptual foundation that's wildly different from mine. So I'm first and foremost going to lay my cards on the table. Here's who I am. Here's why I'm somebody worth listening to. Here's my story. Now, I'd love to hear yours. Where are you at with all of this? And I'm not going to judge you, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you where you're right or you're wrong. I'm just going to listen. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them. I have my approach tends to be one that's like, hey, here's some information, and then just kind of leave it and see where it goes. I want to engage people who are curious. I don't want to force information on people who have no idea what I'm talking about. And I think that the best way to do that, again, is just to live honestly and authentically. Again, going back to my friend who's not Catholic, and now she's like an advocate for fertility awareness.
Amazing.
Right. So, I mean, like, I just, and that's one person. I think a lot of us, I think we can get caught up in thinking, well, I need to reach a lot of people. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to reach the people that you're supposed to reach.
Yeah.
And if you try to expand that to places where you're not supposed to go, you're going to do more harm than good. And I think we have to remember too, with God, nothing is small. Remember, Jesus, he was born in what maybe some would consider the armpit of the world, some backwater of the Roman Empire that nobody cared about. And he had 12 close friends. And look what he did with that, right? One of our greatest doctors of the church, St. Teresa of Lisieux, lived in a cloistered convent. And her spirituality has informed so many, like, nothing is small. Nothing is small. You don't have to be big to change the world. You just have to do what God asks and then let him deal with that however he wants.
So true. I love that. So do you and Emily have any dreams or plans for the future of Fambase?
Lots, but we also have lots of other projects. Yes, I've made the announcement in enough places. Not a ton of specifics, but I did just sign a book contract.
Ooh.
So that's what I'm working on. Very exciting.
Wow.
Very so intimidating and terrifying and wonderful at the same time. But yeah, Mary's been working on her own projects. I've been, doing some kind of one-off speaking gigs here and there as well.
Very cool.
But yeah, so we're doing kind of our own separate things as well. We also just had a lot of personal life stuff come up, and just needed to kind of take a break. But we did just recently launch a totally new webpage on our website. It is a super in-depth method comparison page.
Nice.
So you can, and this was Mary's brain. She was the workhorse on this. And so I just want to give her all the credit. All I did was kind of help with a few logistics here and there, and then the design, but she was on this, and it's incredible. It's incredible. So we have it broken down where you can compare methods based on what's called your reproductive category. So for example, PCOS, perimenopause, postpartum, those are reproductive categories. So hyperfertility, infertility, everything. So you can literally, it's these drop-down tabs, and you can drop down the tab and you can see how Marquette addresses this issue, how Creighton addresses this issue, Billings, FAbM, Base. So you can go down the line, and then we also have another section where you compare what does each method cost? What's the time commitment to learn this method?
Whoa.
All those things. So it's amazing.
Wow.
It is amazing. If you go to our website, FAbMBase.org, there's a big old yellow banner at the top. Just click it. It'll take you right there. So yeah, this is very, very exciting. We do have our own merch. And we designed, just for funsies, because we were like, let's make this fun. We designed a whole new line of t-shirts and mugs and tote bags. And we designed all of it. So everything that you see was I did one of those flower uteruses, flower female reproductive organs. I actually made it. I didn't take something that was already made. So anyway, yes. And when you purchase one of those things, some of the proceeds come directly to us to support our mission as well. So yeah, check it out. I took some inspiration from Taylor Swift. So there's one shirt that says I'm in my cycle aware era. It's my profile picture. It's on my, you'll see it. But yeah, we had so much fun doing that. And it was kind of a fun bow to tie on that whole project. So check it out.
In my cycle aware era. Very cool. So we are wrapping up our time together, and I have one question that I'm asking all my guests, which is, what advice can you give to the young girl who finds herself unexpectedly pregnant, maybe considering abortion, or to the Catholic couple who is trying to avoid and then finds themselves with their own NFP surprise? What can you say to encourage either the single girl or the Catholic couple to encourage them to be open to life?
I will tell you what I wish I had heard when I had a panic attack when I saw my second positive pregnancy test. You're not a bad person. You didn't fail. This baby's not an accident. That may not be a comfort right now. That actually may make you more angry. Particularly if you understand that children come from God and you're like, why is this child coming to me now? Can't you see the whole situation I'm in? And I just invite you to just sit with that pain and that darkness and that confusion and that question. It is not comfortable, but sit with that because it's information. It's not an indictment of you. It is not an indictment of you. It's simply information that if you get curious about it, can lead you into something deep where you will find some kind of healing through that process. And it is excruciatingly painful. And I speak to that from very personal experience. But I just invite you, instead of feeling guilty for where you are, just lean in and ask, what is this information trying to show me? And how can I take this and allow it to be a path of healing?
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Emily. And I am such a fan. So thankful we were able to work it out for you to come on my podcast. Where can people go to find you and connect?
FAbMBase.org, Total Wine with an H.com. I have really taken a step back from Instagram, but I have so much information on there that you can peruse. So at Total Wine _. But I'm also on Substack. I'm trying to have fun with notes lately. So I'm Total Wine on Substack. Yeah, and then the Fambase, we have the Fambase podcast, the Total Wine podcast. Again, I'm kind of taking a hiatus on both of those, but there's a lot of episodes up that you can check out. Oh my gosh, did I leave anything out? Yeah, so Mary, if you're dealing with infertility, highly recommend her. She is Mary G. Bruno. Gosh, Mary, I'm so sorry. I don't have all of her info memorized, but White Lotus Blooming on Instagram. And if you go there, you'll get all the stuff for her. So yeah.
Great. And I will link all that in the episode description. Emily, thank you so much again. I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation.
Yeah, this was so fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Knowledge and inspiration, and God bless you and your family.
Thanks. You too.